Now, with the upcoming election, the future of U.S. space defense is in the spotlight. As the Space Force continues to play an increasingly critical role in national security and technological innovation, the outcome of the election could bring significant changes. Here to break it all down and what the election might mean for the Space Force and the broader space landscape is JD Durkin, CBS News contributor. JD, thanks for joining us this morning.
Good morning. I don't know if I've ever been more excited to talk with you about anything than the Space Force and general rocketry. I love this topic, so it's good to be with you.
Let's talk about how the shift in political leadership might have an impact on the Space Force and their priorities.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I would actually argue space policy is probably one of the things where Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump are probably much more on the same page than a lot of other existing policies. And that's because I think, to Donald Trump's credit, a lot of the things that he started, like the Space Force itself, like the announcement of the Artemis program, ambitions to get back onto the lunar surface, Trinity, these are all things that President Biden continued and Vice President Kamala Harris was a part of. So we know that both candidates want the U.S. to be a leader in the space race. They both want to compete against countries like China and Russia for those ambitions. We talked about the Artemis program, and they really want to enhance private sector space initiatives as well. I think kind of the key differences might actually have to be the kind of Elon Musk wild card, given the success of SpaceX. We had this incredible rocket launch for Starship 5 a few days ago, the fifth test launch for SpaceX there, and the Starship Heavy booster. Of course, he's endorsing Donald Trump. I think that's maybe the wild card, in that if Trump does win and he makes Elon Musk the self-described secretary of cost cutting, what does that mean for the future of space travel, the relationship with a company like SpaceX and the FAA? And I think that's a little bit of the hinge. The difference there between Harris and Trump is really that Elon Musk component.
Especially when it comes to the public and private sector and meeting the needs, especially when it comes to balancing national security, defense, and also innovation. How do you think the new administration will be able to balance all of these very important priorities?
I think that was the clearly stated goal of creating the Space Force. And again, I think, to Trump and former Vice President Mike Pence's credit, this was something a lot of Democrats criticized when Donald Trump created. You had someone like Mark Kelly, who was on the short list to be Kamala Harris's vice president, himself a former space shuttle astronaut. He called the Space Force explicitly a dumb idea when it was created. And yet, once Democrats took control, they sort of looked around, evaluated the position that the government agency was in. They said maybe it actually is a good thing to have some of these strategic policy initiatives controlled by the federal government, and to sort of prepare for potential warfare and infrastructure for a new age of space. And I think ultimately this is about combating Beijing's ambitions, trying to hold China accountable. You listen to the candidates on the campaign trail talk about doing so economically, talk about doing so through the lens of trade and tariffs. But in terms of rocketry and Space Force initiatives, that's a whole other battlefield. And again, I think it's actually something where Vice President Harris and former President Trump actually kind of see eye to eye right now.
And we have about 60 seconds left, JD, but I do want to talk about how this election outcome might have an impact on the U.S. stance when it comes to space militarization and defense, especially with countries like China and Russia.
Yeah, I think, the unfortunate reality for a lot of voters, if you listen to both campaigns right now, there's a lot of promises that are being made, and it's very difficult to discern what is campaign, just sort of rhetoric, and what is actually going to be a reality when they come time to govern. But I think these threats are very front and center. I think we have a little bit more of a sense of what the Space Force will look like if Donald Trump does have a second term, because he did create the Space Force and he created the Artemis missions and these things that Democrats have been willing to continue. We have kind of fewer details with regards to what Vice President Harris would want to do, even if she is actively chair of the National Space Council. It's a bit of wait and see, but certainly these threats are not going anywhere. They're going to be continued to underscore it. It's actually an overall topic I would like to hear both campaigns talk a lot more about between now and Tuesday, November 5th.
And I'm sure we'll have you back on the show to discuss this further, JD. A lot to look out for. Thank you so much.
Can't wait. Thanks a lot.
JD Durkin from CBS News. Again, thanks for joining me.